Oh yeah, reverse discrimination. There's a
It's not reverse discrimination, it's just discrimination. It's just racism if you're judging people on the basis of their skin color. I don't know why this is so difficult. I mean, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of school. You almost have to have a PhD to not be able to see this. I have a son that's half white and a son that's half black and a daughter that's half white and half black. Okay. They're going to mark black because I know that there are people like you at the universities who will say, well, because this person is black, I'm just going to let them in.
No, they're going to mark black because they're black.
Candace Owens absolutely torched woke professor Dr. Luke Wood on Dr. Phil. And trust me, it wasn't even a fair fight. Now, if there's one thing you don't want to do, it's bring up race and privilege against someone like Candace Owens. The modern left's obsession with identity politics? Yeah, that doesn't hold up when faced with actual logic. And in this episode, we're about to see exactly why.
Let me start with you. Is it possible for white people to be discriminated against because they are the majority and discrimination involves power? Is it possible?
Absolutely. It is unequivocally possible. It happens all the time. This actually happens not only in specific instances, but this happens in a systemic way on our most elite college campuses. And I would also say that this is happening not just in education, but in the workplace.
She actually said what the left desperately wants to deny, that discrimination can happen to white people. The claim that white people can't be discriminated against because they hold the majority in Western societies is one of the left's favorite talking points. But let's be real, that's an oversimplification of a far more complex issue. Discrimination isn't just about historical power structures. It's about the treatment of individuals today. And if you're excluding or punishing people based on their skin color, that's discrimination. Ironically, the people who claim to be fighting racism are the ones justifying race-based policies against white people, as if punishing someone for the sins of their ancestors is some kind of moral victory. Spoiler alert, it's not.
Is it justified, though? Because if there has been disparity and if there has been discrimination, if there have been minorities that have been excluded for years and years and years and years, is this the way to start to bring some balance and diversity back to those universities and workplaces?
Absolutely not. Affirmative action has been going on for over 50 years, so this has been happening for a long time. And even now, we've actually seen that it's gotten worse in the sense that race relations are so poisonous, and many people on college campuses actually feel like, because of all of this that's happening, they feel like they're being pitted against each other.
The idea that you can fix past discrimination by enforcing new discrimination is completely backwards. Affirmative action in its current form doesn't correct past injustices. It creates new ones. It tells students and workers that their race, not their merit, is what matters most. And what does that lead to? Division. Instead of fostering unity, these policies pit people against each other, breeding resentment and reinforcing the very divisions they claim to heal. As Thomas Sowell once said, racism is not dead, but it is on life support, kept alive by politicians, race hustlers, and people who get a sense of superiority by denouncing others as racists. And that's exactly what we're seeing on college campuses today, that are instituting policies that devalue merit and individual achievement in favor of racial quotas and identity-based preferences. Now, this counteraction has sunken the United States once again into the depths of systemic racism. Although the US Supreme Court gave a ruling in 2023 against discrimination in colleges based on race and color, the woke regime has tried its best to overturn the verdict since then.
Doctor, what do you think?
Well, I think I would very respectfully disagree. I certainly don't think that white people are disadvantaged in college admissions. In fact, I would say it is the exact opposite, which is why there are policies and practices in place now to try to alleviate the historical burden. It's like if you ever played Monopoly before, right? Imagine like you have a person who's playing Monopoly and they get to go around multiple times, right? And then like halfway through the game, someone gets to enter into the game. And then because they get a turn, right, then the accusation is, well, somehow that game is unfair.
Ah, yes, the classic Monopoly analogy, a tired, simplistic metaphor that completely misrepresents reality. He wants us to believe that history is just a board game where the players are locked into a predetermined fate. He conveniently ignores that the real world isn't a Monopoly board where the rules never change. The barriers that existed in the past have been systematically dismantled over decades through civil rights movements, anti-discrimination laws, and ironically the very affirmative action policies he defends. The fundamental flaw in this argument is that it assumes people are nothing more than racial avatars destined to inherit the privileges or disadvantages of those who came before them. It denies individual agency, hard work, and the ability to shape one's own destiny. By this logic, should an Asian immigrant family arriving in America today be forced to play by disadvantaged rules despite having had no historical role in past discrimination? Should a white student from a poor working class background be punished for an elite class's sins from centuries ago? The truth is, life isn't a board game with rigid turns and preset winners and losers. It's dynamic and ever-changing, and merit should be the standard, not racial engineering. Fairness is giving everyone the same rules from this point forward, not rigging the game to engineer a politically convenient outcome.
The kind of accusation, what we would say is reverse racism, we really just view it as what we call race lighting. Race lighting is what happens when gaslighting is racial. And essentially, if you look historically, colleges and universities have prioritized admissions for students who are white. Why is that? When you admit a student, it's oftentimes based upon your grades, high school grades, and your test scores, ACT and SAT, which are being phased out due to COVID-19. But if you think about it, the SAT and ACT have historically measured access to resources, the neighborhood that you grow up in. It is not a measure of a student's drive, a student's motivation. It is really a measure of their access. And ultimately, we know that when things measure access, they really measure white privilege.
Race lighting? Seriously? His logic has some serious flaws. First, standardized tests like the SAT and ACT are designed to measure academic aptitude, not privilege. Yes, they aren't exactly perfect, but neither is the alternative. Subjective, race-based admissions, which trade measurable academic achievement for ideological gatekeeping. Moreover, the idea that these tests only measure white problems is not only misleading, but deeply patronizing. It assumes that minority students can't possibly excel without institutional crutches, a claim that does more harm than good. Second, eliminating objective standards in the name of equity doesn't level the playing field. It lowers the bar entirely. If grades and test scores are discarded, what replaces them? Skin color, political activism, personal sob stories. How is that not a return to a race-based caste system, just with the hierarchy flipped? Finally, if Dr. Wood truly believes merit-based systems inherently favor white students, then how does he explain Asian American overrepresentation in elite universities? If these tests were merely measuring white privilege, Asian students, many of whom come from immigrant backgrounds with fewer resources, wouldn't be outperforming every other racial group, but they are, which completely dismantles his argument. Now, who could be better to shove it in his face than someone from the community itself, and that too, Candace Owens?
Candace, are we compromising standards
Yes.
if we do that because we haven't fixed the problem down the line?
That's correct. It is the policies are harmful also to the people that they purport to help. And we have all of the evidence there to look at. When you artificially place a Black American into a school in which they do not belong based on their knowledge, doesn't mean that they go on to get A's. In fact, there was a Black adjunct professor, you guys have definitely heard of him, Dr. Thomas Sowell, who was teaching at Cornell University, and he found that
great Thomas Sowell.
The majority of the Black American students that were there were on academic probation. Now, these students were some of the smartest in the nation, but because they were artificially placed amongst their peers at Cornell University, they were failing on academic probation. These policies have never helped Black Americans. It's just basically policies that are put in place to make people feel good, right? I feel like I'm doing something when in fact I'm actually creating harm. You either know the answers or you don't.
The idea that artificially placing students in elite universities helps them is a feel-good fantasy. What happens in reality? Many of these students who would have thrived at a school that matched their academic preparedness suddenly find themselves struggling to keep up. Studies have shown that students who enter universities under affirmative action policies are more likely to drop out, more likely to switch to easier majors, and less likely to graduate on time. Why? Because academic success isn't just about getting into a top-tier school. It's about being prepared for the rigor of that environment. And yet, despite decades of evidence, the left insists on pushing these policies. Not because they work, but because they make people feel like they're doing something good. It's the classic virtue over results mentality. But here's the biggest irony. If you point this out, if you argue that race-based admissions actually harm the students they claim to help, you're labeled a racist.
When you say, hey, we have Black students at a particular school who aren't performing at that school as well, the immediate assumption that you're making is, well, maybe it's because they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, or they don't belong here. whereas it could be about the experience that they're having at that institution. Professors who believe that they're not intelligent enough, that they don't have the capability to do the work, that they see them as criminals, deviants, dangerous, up to no good, or they talk about them with the they statements. They're lazy. They don't care. They don't really belong here. They're only here for the financial aid.
I'm giving you actual facts.
No,
right?
I'm giving you actual facts
based
upon
extensive
extensive
and you can say, well, maybe they
research
just
that's
don't
been
feel
done.
good, but that's not the case. I mean, I went to university. I did not feel good, right? I didn't pull the best grades in high school. Probably got into a better university than I should have gotten into based on my performance in high school. It wasn't because of my feelings. It's because I wasn't focused on it. And that we're talking about a cultural problem, what's going on back at home, as was in my circumstance. And none of that is because of institutionalized policy. It almost seems like you guys refuse to accept that, Black students aren't performing well. You feel like you have to have this burden of responsibility when, in fact, if you actually wanted to help, you would look at the facts, re-examine the fact that it's not helping anybody. It's not helping Black Americans to artificially place them into universities, and you'd make effective change.
Candace Owens cuts straight to the heart of the issue. The problem isn't systemic racism in universities. It's deeper cultural and personal factors that aren't being addressed. Dr. Luke Wood's argument hinges on the assumption that poor performance must be due to discrimination rather than individual preparedness or background influences. But that's the problem with race-based admissions. When students struggle, instead of acknowledging academic mismatches, the blame is shifted to institutional racism. That's exactly the danger of race-based policies. They don't elevate students based on merit. They create a system where entitlement replaces hard work. When any group is given unearned advantages, it undermines the entire foundation of academic excellence. The real tragedy, the students placed in these institutions under lower standards often struggle to keep up, while more qualified candidates are denied opportunities they have earned. This isn't justice, it's a recipe for long-term decline. The goal should be to uplift students by improving education at the root level, not by artificially placing them in environments they're unprepared for, setting them up for failure.
I'm of mixed background. What am I supposed to mark on an application? Am I supposed to mark multiple boxes? And plus, if you are painting people as an oppressor, if you're white,
that's a terrible thing to tell someone to do.
Well, it's the truth because you believe in affirmative action. So I said mark Black. If you're a mixed student, I'm in an interracial relationship, so I can speak to this. I have a son that's half white and a son that's half Black and a daughter that's half white and half Black. Okay. They're going to mark Black because I know that there are people like you at the universities who will say, well, because this person is Black, I'm just going to let them in.
No, they're going to mark Black because they're Black.
Well, they're half Black and half white. They're both, right? So it is true. You overlook So you overlook interracial students.
But
so what do you mean? Why are you saying they're going to mark Black?
Socialize them in society.
So the answer is if you can't. I mean, you can mark both. Can you mark both? I don't know if you can. Yes. What are you going to look at that applicant as a little bit less because they're half white? How do you guys figure that out?
How they look at it is, again, holistically across a number of different factors.
I love me a buzzword. Holistically and racial consciousness.
Oh yeah, reverse discrimination. There's a buzzword.
It's not reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination. It's just racism if you're judging people on the basis of their skin color. I don't know why this is so difficult. I mean, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of school. You almost have to have a PhD to not be able to see this.
Candace Owens hit the nail on the head. How does it make sense to combat historical racism by imposing a new form of racial favoritism? The whole idea of correcting past injustice by creating new injustices is a contradiction. You don't fix a broken system by tilting the scales in the opposite direction. You dismantle the entire structure of race-based decision-making altogether. And the irony is, the people pushing these divisive policies are the same ones claiming to be against discrimination. If the goal was really equality, then race wouldn't even be a factor in admissions or hiring in the first place. But that's not what's happening here. What we're seeing is the weaponization of identity politics to force a new racial hierarchy, one that just swaps out the players instead of fixing the game. Instead